right. Well, hope you're all doing well. Hope you've been enjoying the summer. I think I was saying during the announcements, I tend to try to use July as a deep breath. Kind of knowing that we're going into the fall and that it's, and it's just beautiful out. And so I take a deep breath. I do some mountain time and some beach time. You know what I mean? So I hope you were here a couple weeks ago for Pastor Robin picked up where I had left off. We're in Matthew 10 right now, and so it's actually a continuation of a conversation that started at the end of Matthew 9, and it's kind of Jesus saying, "We're going to. I've been showing you how to do things. I've been teaching you things, and now I'm going to kind of send you off on your own, and two by two to some degree." So. So there's a bit of a shift change, and we're going to pick up in verse 16. There's a bit of a tone change because before Jesus is telling them, like, you're going to go do all the things that I've been doing, right? You're going to do the miracles, you're going to the healings, you're going to feed, you're going to help, you're going to serve, like everything that I've been showing you how to do, you're going to get to do, right? And so there's kind of this, I imagine an excitement like, oh, this is good. I can't believe we get to do this, right? It's like Jesus has been doing it. We've been watching it. It's so amazing. And so he gives us all these instructions into verse 15, right, of what we're going to get to do and what they're going to get to do. And then there's a tone shift. And that's where we pick up today. It shifts a little bit. So this is verse 16. It says, I am sending you out like sheep into the midst of wolves. So it's like, all right, guys, come here, listen close. This is not a vacation, right? It's like he's like, I'm sending you out, like, and I know you're going to see some amazing things. You're going to do amazing things, and it's going to be, terrific, like what you're about to do. But you are about to enter into your number one predator, right? Because so wolves and sheep, right? They're not just natural enemies, right? Wolves and sheep. Wolves are actually at this time, like in this area, the predator. The wolves would be the main predator. So Jesus isn't just saying, "Hey, you're going to go into a tough time." It's, "Hey, you're going to go into maybe the most difficult thing you've ever done." And I'm telling you, if you've gone into ministry, it doesn't sound too difficult sometimes, but the emotional, the things that you get into, and the things that you're always dealing with when you begin serving your community, you do get pushback. It is not easy. And so the wolf is the apex predator, and the sheep are the most vulnerable that exists. And so it's going to be difficult. And so he says, I'm sending you out like sheep into the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. So what does it mean to be wise as snakes and innocent as doves? Because when I first read this, and maybe when you first read it, when you think snakes or serpents, like you think the bad part of the Bible, right? It's like the snakes aren't good. Like, Jesus, you don't really want us to be like snakes, do you? And so he's not actually telling us to be like snakes, right, in totality. He's saying to be wise as snakes. Because later Jesus calls he'll call the Pharisees, you brood of vipers, right? So there's definitely a negative idea of being snake-like, but he's saying there is something about snakes that you might want to grab onto. And you see it in Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. It says, now the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animal that the Lord God had made. And so Jesus isn't just coming up with a random phrase or a random animal, right? Jesus is actually going, hey, remember his audience is Jewish, right? His main audience is Jewish. So he's talking about something that they know very well. They know Genesis 3, right? And so he's saying, no, there's a part of the serpent that I want you to grasp onto. And so Jesus tells us to be like serpents, not in venom, but in vision. And so this is kind of what it looks like in our world. Simply put, I think it's important that we know the context in which we're presenting the gospel to those around us. When we're talking about Jesus, it's important that we know the context, the culture, all the things around us when we have these types of discussions. know who you're talking to, right? Because listen, you can speak the truth, and if you have kids, you know this. You can speak the truth all day long. And if they don't listen, it doesn't matter. You're just like the Peanuts, teacher in Peanuts, just wah, 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 right? It's like that idea, like it's like if you don't know who you're talking to, or you can't speak the language of the people that you're talking to, and I don't mean English, but I mean cultural language, like then you're going to miss it. I think, so what we too often do is we push our culture instead of the gospel. They say, I want you to be like me instead of like Jesus. And that's a huge difference, because you don't want to be like me, right? You want to be like Jesus. And so Paul, there's a section in Acts, and it's like 16 verses. So if you're going to try to follow along, it's not going to make a lot of sense, because I kind of just tightened it up to make it fit within the sermon here. But if you want to read it later, this is out of Acts 17, verse 16 through 32, all right? And this is a kind of a mashed-in version. So it says, while waiting in Athens, Paul noticed the city was full of idols, and it grieved him, so he reasoned in the synagogue and also in the marketplace with anyone who would talk. Some mocked him as a babbler, but others were curious because he kept talking about Jesus and the resurrection. They brought him to the Areopagus, the public stage for ideas, and said, tell us more. This is new to us. So Paul right now, he's actually having these discussions. This is not Paul on a stage with a megaphone, right? This is actually, this area that they're talking is where people went to debate, right? They went to these spots to have these conversations. So he's entering what? Into their world, right? So it says they brought him there, and so tell us more. This is new to us. And so Paul stood up and spoke to the Athenians with insight and respect. He says, I see that you're deeply spiritual, right? Respect. I see that you're deeply spiritual. I even found an altar to an unknown God. What you worship without knowing, I now proclaim. The God who made the world doesn't live in man-made temples or need anything from us. He created all people and set their times and places so that they may seek him, though he is not far from any of us. And as your own poets, right? So now he's talking about their own writings. This is what your people say, right? Your own poets. We are his offspring. So we shouldn't think God is like gold or stone. He calls everyone now to turn back to him. He's proven this by raising Jesus from the dead. Some laughed, some wanted to hear more, and a few believed. And so Paul went into their spaces, talked about things that they understood. And listen, he didn't mention Moses, right? Didn't mention David. And I know in this kind of compressed version, he mentions Jesus, but if you go back and read the whole text, you actually don't use Jesus' name in the discussion, right? Imagine, there's some churches right now, if you said, it's like if you don't say the name Jesus 17 times, it's like you start questioning my theology, right? It's like, or my salvation, right? It's like and I try to argue with people. I shouldn't argue with people about this stuff. But like the letter J, like people are like, the name Jesus. I'm like, the letter J, and I've said this before, the letter J didn't even exist in the English language till the 1500s, right? So it's like we haven't been saying G. We've actually, and when you think about all the other English language, we get tied up on just the name sometimes instead of the person. We should be more interested in the person than just like, oh, he didn't say the name exactly or these things. But Paul used Greek poets to preach to philosophers. And so it's the context. And right, isn't this exactly what Matthew is doing too? Right? So while Paul in this context doesn't use any kind of Jewish language or any of those things, but we know Matthew is speaking to a Jewish context. And so he's always using those things. He's always talking about the things that they know. And so that's this idea of being wise and knowing who you're talking to and how you're talking to people. That's and it's not watering it down. It's wisdom in action. There's another passage that Paul talks about. I don't think I gave this to you. I found this morning, I think. It's 1 Corinthians 9:19 through 23, if you want to read it later. It says this: For though I am free with respect to all, I have made myself a slave to all, so that I might win more of them. And catch this: to the Jews, I became like a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law, I became as one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law, I became like one outside the law, though I am not free from God's law, but I'm under Christ's law. To the weak, I became weak so that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people that I might by all means save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel so that I may share in its blessing. And so Paul's saying, listen, this is not about me, right? It is not about my culture, the things that I like, the things that I think, everything should be. It's like, no, I'm going to become like those around me. I'm going to be able to speak into the lives of those around me because I know them and because I can relate to them. And so if we begin to stand on our high horses and talking down to people, it's like, listen, I don't like that. I hate that. Listen, that's a good way to get me fired up, right? It's like, so we have to be same level. And that, isn't that what the cross tells us? I mean, literally the cross tells us that the ground is level for all of us, right? None of us, all of us have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, right? It's like the cross tells us the ground is level. And so we should speak level to those around us. But he says being wise as serpents isn't the only prerequisite for the mission, right? It's also innocent as doves. And so just so we can move on to the next verse, I'm just going to show you what Peter says about this, and we'll move on. 1 Peter 2:12, conduct yourselves honorably among the Gentiles, right? The Gentiles are non-Jews. So that, though they malign you as evildoers, they may see your honorable deeds and glorify God when he comes to judge. And so it's this idea that Jesus is putting forth to his disciples, saying, live well and live wise. Live well and live wise. And that is the call. Like, as he sends them out, it's like, it's going to be difficult. Be wise and live well. So let's go back to our text, picking up at verse 17. Beware of them, those are the wolves, for they will hand you over to councils and flog you in their synagogues. There's a commentary that I've been using, and their names are Davies and Allison, and they said this, and I really loved what they said here. They said flogging in synagogues was a form of discipline for violations of Torah or community order. This was a recognized punishment under Jewish law and emphasized how the very place where disciples worshiped became the place where they're wounded. There's a lot of things that probably drive me nuts, but if there's anything that drives me more in ministry, it is when a place that's supposed to be safe is a place that does damage. Like this is a place where people are supposed to be able to come in and not be cut down, right? I mean, listen, again, there's wolves out there. So it's not even just like, so sometimes we're not just hurt by the wolves in the world, but actually the sheep that we're supposed to be friends and brothers and sisters, right? And even more so, there's times that we're hurt by the shepherds, hurt by pastors, hurt by leaders. Like, I've done that. Like, at our last church, I left because of moral failure. I did damage. I hurt people. You know what I mean? I didn't do everything that I was supposed to do. And so when we left, I had to get a lot of help. I had to get a lot of care, and I had to get a lot of accountability for me. And so what I did is I'm not sure if I want to pastor again when I was in that moment. It's like, I don't know, but I want to find out. I want to at least follow the path. And so I met with a board. They're called the Board of Pastoral and Church Relations. And this was in a different denomination. This wasn't Methodist. And so I met with them, and what the idea was, let's have a discussion and just see what's going to happen with me. Like, I don't know, but I want to have someone to walk through this process with and just see what's going on. And I said, well, it'll at least be 2 years, but let's start this process as I maybe want to pastor again. And we talked I think we probably talked for about an hour and a half that first meeting. And I remember saying, one of the things that really stood out is I said, I feel like what I did is going to cause some people to never want to go back to church. It's going to really cause people to want to separate from God forever. And this one guy in the back corner, there's probably only 7 people. We'll call him Bobby. That's not his name. And he said, you're right. people are going to hell because of you. And I know the theology that they're coming from, and I understand the theology that I came out of. And so I just kind of put my head down, and it's crushing, that thought, the idea of that, And so we went along, and 3 months later, I went back. We had another meeting, and we talked, and we did some things, and I had made some progress in my own heart, and the guy said it again. He said, "There's people in hell because of you." Now, I'm a freak about words, all right? So when he said there are people there, now I thought no one has died yet, right? Like that was my initial response inside. I was like, wait. This doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I had a little bit of a pushback, right? Because it really caught me off guard that he said it again, And so we kind of moved past that, and I went home, and then 3 months later, we got back together. And it was actually 7 years to this week, actually. So we were talking, and he said it again. And I was prepared. And so we exchanged words, ideas, concepts. and eventually the leader of the Northeast Ohio area had to kind of break it off and shut it down. And I said, "God bless you guys, I'm out." And it's like, but here's what he said to me that at the end that messed with me for a little bit. He said, "Faithful are the wounds of a brother, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy." And I went home, because that verse, I went home and I was like, I'm going to find this verse. Like, you can't just give me one verse. I want the passage, I want the chapter above it and below it. And so I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it for anything. And so when I finally found the verse, it actually doesn't say brother. It says friend. And I thought in that moment, Bobby was not a friend. And so I can tell my friends something that can you don't want to hear, but you need to hear. But that's not what that was. That was someone using Scripture as a hammer, right, to hurt someone and to wound somebody. And it's like, but here's the reality: is like we can all be Bobbies. we can all do it. Like we've experienced it. We've hurt people with words. We've said things we shouldn't have said. But this is not the way that it should be. And so and I think this is why Matthew 10 matters so much. Because Jesus doesn't just warn us about the world. He warns us about religious spaces that wound. And so we need to be different. Anybody with me? All right. We need to be different. So my heart breaks for people who have been hurt by church and hurt by church people. And that's what gets my heart beating. And so in verse 18 it says this, "And you will be dragged before governors and kings because of me, as a testimony to them and the Gentiles." I told you this isn't a fun one, right? This isn't all the joy and joy down in my heart stuff, right? This is not only will the religious elites wound you, but you will also expect to be challenged by your government. So something at least that both sides of the aisle can agree on, right? That the government will let you down. It will push against your rights and what you believe is true. It will act in ways that you don't believe is right, and you still have to live, again, remember the whole Sermon on the Mount was this idea of living as people of the kingdom of God within the rule of another government, within the rule of Rome. That Jesus is saying, this is how you live. And so when we're living here in America, Jesus is saying, this is how you live, regardless of who's in power. You live this way. And so, but catch this, it says at the bottom of that, it says, this is a simple reality that Jesus is trying to get across. This road isn't easy. And at the end, it says, as a testimony to them and the Gentiles. And so I don't always love this. It's your struggles are a testimony to the Christians who wound you and the non-Christians in your life. The way that you go through these things, the way that you go through the storms, the way that you go through the struggles, the way that you persevere, it happens, it affects those looking around you. Are you familiar with the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Yeah, I loved this story, but I don't know if you remember. So there was, they were under the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar, and there was this, they made this golden calf, and what would happen is they would play this music, harps and lyres and all these things. They would play all these songs. Anytime the music played, everyone had to stop and bow down and worship the calf, right? And so that was just the rule, right? And so guess what happens when everyone around you bows down and you don't? You stand out. You stand out a little bit. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they refuse to bow before the golden calf. And this is in Daniel chapter 3, verse 15. We'll pick up. It says this. This is Nebuchadnezzar. He says, "But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" I love that. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to present a defense to you in this matter. If our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire and out of your hand, O king, let him deliver us. But even if he doesn't, but if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will still not serve your gods, and we will not worship the golden statue that you have set up." Now that's a predicament. That's a storm. That's a challenge. Death or obedience. And so they throw him into the furnace, right? And as they sat there, they noticed that while they threw 3 people in, it looked like 4 were in there. And they said that the one looked like he was a son of the gods. And so they don't burn up, and they pull them out. They don't even smell like smoke. Nothing's burnt on them. And this is verse 28. It's so good. Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. They disobeyed the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree: any people, nation, or language that utters blasphemy against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb and their houses laid to ruins." I imagine, like, that's a little far, king. You don't have to do all that. But for there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way. And so it is not the sheep, listen, it is not the sheep who fight off the wolves. It's not, right? It's the shepherd. The shepherd fights off the wolves. The shepherd is the one that goes into the furnace with you. It's the one that is in the midst of all that you're doing and all that you're struggling with. And so it says in verse 19, when they hand you over, notice it didn't say if. When they hand you over, do not worry about how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you at that time. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. So I'm almost at the end of the child raising stage of my life, right? They're almost, like my youngest is 16. And so what's kind of fun is seeing some of the things you tried to, like, just shove into their brains, right, pop out occasionally, right? And so, like, I think something happened. I think it was one of my kids' friends, like, their car got damaged. Like, no one was hurt or anything. It was a nice new car. And one of my kids goes, "Yeah, teenagers shouldn't be driving new cars." And I was like, yes. It's like, so this idea that it's because, but that doesn't have, that's an intentional thing that I tried to just smash into their brains, right? But it took me spending time with them, right? It took me talking to them. It took me just trying to teach them. It took me demonstrating them, showing them examples of why it happened. So what does that mean? There was always a relationship happening, right? I wasn't away from my kids. I didn't let them just kind of figure out. And this is what Jesus was doing with the disciples, right? He's going, "I'm going to teach you. I'm going to show you," right? "I'm going to teach you. I'm going to show you." And he's, "I'm going to demonstrate it. I'm going to demonstrate," right? All this, and then he's going, "I'm going to send you out." And so when he says that you're going to have the words that you need, it's not magic. It's because that Jesus has been investing in them and they've been right with him. And so Jesus has full confidence that he can send the disciples off going, "I know they know what to do. You're going to be nervous. You might freak out a little bit, but ultimately I know what's inside of you because I put it there," right? And so he trusts. And so this is when I'm letting my kids go out in the world. It's like, I trust that I have at least given them the tools necessary. And this is what Jesus is saying. He's saying, "Listen, you're gonna know what to say. You're gonna know what to do. I'm with you because I've been with you, and I'm inside of you, and it's just gonna come out of you. That's why you don't have to worry. And that only happens through intentional relationship. And so taking time to teach, taking time to show them, like that's what's important. So if you're not spending time in God's word, if you're not spending time in prayer, I wouldn't grasp onto this promise so tightly, okay? Because this is about relationship. This is about being in the midst of it. And so Jesus is talking to people as he's been walking with me. He says, I'm sending you because you're filled with me, right? And so if you're not spending time with Jesus, if you're not spending time with God, you're going to struggle, right? It's going to be more difficult because you're not saturated with the words of Jesus. So let me try to wind this up. Verse 21 says, sibling will betray sibling to death, and a father his child, and children will rise. I know you're excited about this passage. This has just been a great passage. Parents, and have them put to death, and you will be hated by all because of my name, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. Jesus doesn't end this section with a fairy tale, right? He doesn't promise applause. He says families will fracture, people will despise you, and persecution will follow you because of his name. But don't miss it. He says what? He says it's not the people that fight back. It's not the people that argue back or win the arguments or win the battles. He says it's the people that endure. The ones that endure. And so again, it's not your fight. It's not your fight. You don't have to fight the wolves. You don't have to win the argument. You don't have to prove you're right. You just have to endure through the struggle. And so in verse 23 it says this, when they persecute you in this town, flee to the next, for truly I tell you, you will not have finished going through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. I saw a video the other day, or maybe it was a meme, I don't know. But there was this lady, and she was I think she was calling her husband, and she said, I almost burnt the garage down. And I was like, okay. And so what happened, right? It was like, well, I saw a spider. And what she did was fine. She stepped on it, right? Stepped on the spider, no problems, except hundreds of them kind of came out from the big one. And so she doused the floor with lighter fluid and threw a match on it. Which, listen, you got them all. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like spiders. The first R-rated movie, I think, was Arachnophobia. It freaked me out forever. Right? And so it's like, the idea is when you are persecuted, and this has happened from the beginning of the people of God, when you are persecuted, when the church is persecuted, when Israel is persecuted, they spread out, and they grow. And they go to all kinds of places, and that's what's going to happen. And so when Jesus says, listen, if you're not accepted, just go to the next town. Go to the next town. You don't have to fight them. You don't have to do that. You're going to spread. And when persecution comes, and we don't really have, I'm not saying, like, we do have a little persecution in the United States. There are, sometimes there's shootings, or there's like churches have been burnt down. But what's happening in China, what's happening in North Korea, like the things that where missionaries are sneaking into are just being, we cannot even fathom some of what they're dealing with. And what happens is they don't give up. They're not squashed. They spread. And that's what happens. And that's what Jesus calls it to us. When we get into difficult times, don't give up. Endure to the end. God bless you, church.